When we think about biblical times, most of us imagine dusty marketplaces, ancient scrolls, and maybe a few Roman coins changing hands. But buried beneath centuries of sand and forgotten by history are some of the most extraordinary coins ever minted. Coins that tell stories the Bible never fully revealed. Each one holds secrets that archaeologists are still uncovering today. But all of them have one thing in common. They've been overlooked by almost everyone. Until now. Think you know biblical history? Think again. Subscribe now because we're just getting started. First on our list, Jewish coins that look completely Greek. We're talking about the Yehud silver owl coins, some of the most mysterious pieces of currency ever discovered in the ancient world. These coins are absolute archaeological gold. Well, silver actually. They were minted in the Yehud province. That's what the Persians called Judah, after the Babylonian exile, somewhere between 375 and 332 BCE. And here's where it gets weird. They look exactly like Athenian owl coins. Now you might be thinking, why would Jewish coin makers copy Greek designs? The answer isn't what you'd expect. See, Athens had basically created the ancient world's version of the dollar. Athenian owl coins were trusted everywhere, from Egypt to Babylon. They were the international currency of choice. So, when the Jews got permission to mint their own coins under Persian rule, they made a brilliant business decision. They kept the familiar owl design that traders recognized, but added something revolutionary. Right there on the coin, in tiny Hebrew letters, they inscribed Yehud. This wasn't just minting money, this was declaring identity. For the first time since the Babylonian conquest, Jews were literally stamping their name back onto history. These coins represent the earliest known Jewish currency, predating even the Maccabean revolt by centuries. The crazy part? We almost lost them forever. Most of these coins were discovered through the Temple Mount Sifting Project. Volunteers literally sifting through debris that had been carelessly dumped from the Temple Mount. Can you imagine some of the most important Jewish artifacts in history nearly thrown away as rubble? Only a handful of these coins exist today. We're talking maybe a dozen confirmed specimens worldwide. Each one is worth more than a luxury car, not because of the silver content, but because of what they represent. These little coins prove that Jewish autonomy and identity survived the exile. They show us that even under Persian rule, Jews found ways to assert their cultural independence. What makes these coins truly special isn't their rarity, it's their message. Every time someone held one of these owl coins, they were holding a declaration that said, "We're still here, we survived, and we're not going anywhere." That tiny Hebrew inscription, Yehud, wasn't just a mint mark, it was a promise. A promise that would echo through 25 centuries of Jewish history right up to today. Coming in at number 7, we have a coin that breaks all the rules. According to everything we thought we knew about ancient history, coins weren't supposed to exist in 8th century BCE Judah, but here we are, staring at King Hezekiah's half ma'ah, and it's completely rewriting the textbooks. This isn't just any old bronze coin. We're talking about a piece that predates Persian coinage by over a century. Minted under one of Judah's most famous kings around 700 BCE. The Hebrew legend reads, YHZQYH. That's Hezekiah's name in ancient script. And on the reverse, an owl. Sound familiar? Here's where it gets fascinating. Hezekiah wasn't just any king, he was a reformer. The Bible tells us he centralized worship in Jerusalem, destroyed pagan shrines, and basically revolutionized how his kingdom operated. But nowhere in scripture does it mention him minting coins. Yet here's the archaeological evidence, sitting right in our hands. The controversy around this coin has split scholars for decades. Traditional numismatists insist that coinage was invented in Lydia around 650 BCE, then spread through the Persian Empire. But Hezekiah's half ma'ah throws that timeline into chaos. If this coin is authentic, and mounting evidence suggests it island, then Jews were minting currency before anyone else in the region. Think about what this means. While Assyria was threatening Jerusalem's walls, while Hezekiah was digging his famous tunnel to secure the city's water supply, he was also creating an independent monetary system. This wasn't just about economics, it was about sovereignty. It was about declaring that Judah wouldn't depend on foreign currency anymore. The owl symbolism is particularly intriguing. Some scholars think Hezekiah borrowed the design from Greek traders who were already using owl imagery. Others believe it represents wisdom, fitting for a king known for his religious reforms. But there's a third theory, one that's gaining traction among archaeologists. What if the owl represented something deeper? In ancient Near Eastern culture, owls were often associated with protection, with watching over sacred spaces. Hezekiah was the king who cleansed the temple, who restored proper worship. Maybe this little bronze coin was his way of saying, "We're watching, we're protecting what's sacred." The implications are staggering. If Hezekiah really minted coins in the 8th century, it means Jews were innovating in ways we never imagined. It means biblical kings were more economically sophisticated than we gave them credit for. And it means there might be other impossible artifacts out there, waiting to be discovered. This coin doesn't just break historical rules, it breaks them with style. Number 6. Pontius Pilate Bronze Pruta AD 29-32, and here's where biblical history gets personal. We're talking about coins minted by the man who condemned Jesus to death. That's right. Pontius Pilate wasn't just a governor, he was also running his own mint in Jerusalem. These little bronze prutat were the everyday currency of 1st century Judea. When Jesus told his disciples about the widow's mite, when he spoke about rendering unto Caesar, when money changers were doing business in the temple courts, these were the coins changing hands. These Pilate-minted prutat were literally the background soundtrack to the gospel stories. The imagery on these coins tells us everything about Pilate's political situation. On the obverse, 3 bound barley ears. On the reverse, a simpulum. That's a Roman lustration cup used for religious ceremonies. Notice what's missing? No human faces, no imperial portraits, no images that would violate Jewish religious sensibilities. This wasn't Pilate being respectful. This was Pilate being smart. He'd seen what happened to previous governors who pushed too hard against Jewish customs. Revolts were expensive, and Rome didn't like expensive. So Pilate chose symbols that were religiously neutral but still unmistakably Roman. The barley ears were brilliant propaganda. Barley was the grain of the common people, the food of the poor. By putting barley on his coins, Pilate was essentially saying, "I care about feeding you." It was ancient political marketing at its finest. The lustration cup reinforced Roman religious authority without depicting Roman gods. But here's the bitter irony. While Pilate was carefully avoiding religious offense on his coins, he was simultaneously making decisions that would echo through 2,000 years of Christian history. The same hands that approved these delicate diplomatic designs also signed Jesus' death warrant. Recent archaeological discoveries have found these Pilate pruto all over Jerusalem, in residential areas, near the temple, even in the drainage systems beneath the city. This tells us they weren't just ceremonial currency. They were the working-class money of everyday life. When you hold one of these coins, you're holding a piece of metal that might have passed through the hands of Jesus' disciples. It might have been used to buy bread in the same markets where Jesus taught. It might have clinked in the money changers' boxes that Jesus overturned in the temple. The Greek inscriptions reference Tiberius Caesar and his mother Livia, reminding everyone exactly who was really in charge. But they also include Pilate's name and title, Pontius Pilatus Praefectus e Judea, governor of Judea, the man caught between Roman expectations and Jewish resistance. These coins survived the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 CE. They survived the Bar Kokhba revolt. They survived 2 millennia of conquest and exile. And now they sit in museums and private collections, silent witnesses to one of history's most pivotal moments. Pilate thought he was just minting everyday currency. He had no idea he was creating some of the most historically significant coins ever produced. Every time archaeologists find another Pilate pruta, they're finding another connection to the events that changed the world. Halfway through our list at number 5, Tyrian shekel, the temple tax coin, we encounter the most controversial coin in Christian history. Here's something that will shake everything you thought you knew about the 30 pieces of silver The Tyrian shekel, the coin that Judas received for betraying Jesus, wasn't even Jewish. That's right, the most sacred transaction in Christian history was conducted with pagan currency. These silver shekels were minted in Tyre, a Phoenician city in modern-day Lebanon, and they were covered with images that would make any devout Jew cringe. On the obverse, the head of Melkart, the Phoenician version of Hercules. On the reverse, an eagle standing on a ship's prow. So why were Jews using coins depicting foreign gods for their most sacred purpose? The answer is both practical and heartbreaking. The temple required the finest silver available for the annual half-shekel tax that every Jewish male had to pay. Roman coins were debased, mixed with cheaper metals. But Tyrian shekels were nearly pure silver, exactly what the temple demanded. This created an impossible situation. To fulfill their religious obligations, Jews had to handle coins that violated their deepest beliefs about idolatry. Every time someone paid their temple tax, they were literally placing pagan gods into the sacred treasury. The irony was overwhelming. But the purity of the silver trumped religious sensibilities. The money changers in the temple courts weren't just convenient, they were absolutely necessary. Pilgrims came to Jerusalem carrying Roman denarii, Greek drachmas, coins from across the empire, but only Tyrian shekels were acceptable for temple payments. Those money changers that Jesus overturned, they were providing an essential religious service, at a profit, of course. When Judas received his 30 pieces of silver, he was holding approximately 4 months' wages for a common laborer. But more than that, he was holding coins that represented the fundamental compromise at the heart of first-century Judaism: sacred purposes achieved through profane means. Archaeological excavations around the Temple Mount have uncovered hundreds of these Tyrian shekels, proof that they were indeed the standard currency for temple transactions. Some still bear the wear marks from being handled by countless pilgrims, each one representing someone's attempt to fulfill their religious duty. The bitter irony extends even further. These same coins that funded the temple's operations, that paid for sacrifices, and maintained the priesthood, also became the price of betrayal. The very currency that was supposed to bring Jews closer to God became the instrument of the Messiah's betrayal. When archaeologists find Tyrian shekels today, they're not just finding ancient currency, they're finding evidence of one of history's most complex moral compromises. Silver coins that embody the tension between religious purity and practical necessity, between sacred intentions and profane reality. At number 4, the Great Revolt silver half shekel, minted during the final desperate years of Jewish Jerusalem. When the temple was about to fall, and everything was about to change forever. This coin tells one of the most heartbreaking stories in Jewish history. By year 3 of the revolt, which corresponds to 69 to 70 CE, Roman legions were closing in on Jerusalem. The city was under siege. People were starving. But Jewish rebels were still striking silver coins with an inscription that defied reality: Holy Jerusalem. Think about the audacity of that moment. While Vespasian's armies were literally surrounding the city, while the temple was months away from destruction, Jewish mint workers were carefully crafting coins that proclaimed Jerusalem's eternal holiness. It wasn't just currency, it was an act of faith. A declaration that some things are more permanent than Roman power. The imagery on these coins is loaded with meaning. The obverse shows a chalice, representing the temple vessels that the rebels were desperately trying to protect. The reverse bears the inscription, half shekel in ancient Hebrew, maintaining the religious connection to temple taxation even as the temple itself was doomed. Only a handful of these coins have ever been discovered. Most of the silver was probably melted down during the siege, either by the rebels to fund their resistance or by the Romans as spoils of war. Each surviving specimen represents not just rare metal, but the final gasps of an independent Jewish state that wouldn't exist again for nearly 2,000 years. The archaeological context of these discoveries is heartbreaking. Many have been found in burned layers, evidence of the catastrophic fire that consumed Jerusalem in 70 CE. Some were discovered clutched in skeletal hands. people who died holding on to these symbols of hope even as their world collapsed around them. What makes these coins truly extraordinary is their craftsmanship. Despite the siege conditions, despite the lack of resources, these half shekels were minted with remarkable precision. The Hebrew lettering is clear. The imagery is detailed. The silver content is high, even facing annihilation. Jewish artisans maintained their standards. The inscription, Year 3, has become one of the most poignant dates in Jewish numismatics. It marks not just a year in the revolt, but the final year of the Second Temple period. After 70 CE, Judaism would have to reinvent itself completely, and coins like this would become precious reminders of what was lost. When you hold one of these great revolt half shekels, you're holding the last official currency of ancient Jewish independence. You're touching silver that was minted while the temple still stood, while priests still performed sacrifices, while Jerusalem was still the center of the Jewish world. These coins didn't just commemorate the Great Revolt, they embodied it. They represent the Jewish refusal to surrender, the determination to maintain identity even in the face of impossible odds, the belief that Holy Jerusalem would outlast any earthly empire. Number 3 brings us to a coin Jesus himself would have seen, the Alexander Jannaeus half pruta, better known as the widow's mite. The tiny bronze coin that became the centerpiece of one of Christianity's most powerful parables about sacrifice and generosity. These miniature coins were minted during the Hasmonean period, when Jews had won their independence from Greek rule and were governing themselves for the first time in centuries. Alexander Jannaeus wasn't just a king, he was also a high priest, combining political and religious authority in ways that would make later rabbis deeply uncomfortable. But here's what makes these coins truly special. When Jesus sat in the temple courts and watched people making their offerings, when he pointed out the poor widow who gave 2 small coins, he was almost certainly watching someone deposit Jannaeus half-pruto into the temple treasury. The Gospel tells us the widow gave 2 mites, the smallest denomination available. In 1st century Palestine, that meant Alexander Jannaeus bronze lepta. Coins so small, they barely weighed more than a modern paperclip. Yet Jesus declared that her tiny offering was worth more than all the silver and gold contributed by the wealthy. Archaeological evidence supports this identification. Hundreds of these Hasmonean bronze coins have been found in excavations around the Temple Mount, proof that they remained in circulation long after Jannaeus died. By Jesus' time, these coins were probably considered old-fashioned, the equivalent of finding wheat pennies in your pocket change today. The symbolism runs deeper than most people realize. These weren't just random small coins, they were issued by a Jewish king during a brief moment of independence, a time when Jews controlled their own destiny. When the widow gave her 2 mites, she was giving coins that represented Jewish sovereignty, Jewish pride, Jewish hope. The irony is striking. Alexander Jannaeus was known for his military campaigns, his territorial expansion, his sometimes brutal suppression of religious opponents. He was a warrior king who ruled through strength and political cunning, yet his legacy in Christian tradition comes through the humblest possible use of his currency. 2 tiny coins given by a nameless woman whose generosity moved Jesus to tears. Today, authentic Alexander Jannaeus bronze coins are surprisingly affordable compared to other biblical currency. You can actually own a widow's mite for less than the cost of a nice dinner. But their historical and spiritual significance is immeasurable, connecting us directly to one of Jesus' most memorable teachings about the true nature of sacrifice. When you hold one of these ancient bronze coins, you're holding a piece of metal that might have been present during the most famous act of giving in human history. Our runner-up at number 2, Etrurian bronzes, the forgotten coins from a forgotten kingdom. We're talking about Etrurian bronzes, currency from a tetrarchy that most people have never heard of, but which played a crucial role in the political landscape of Jesus' time. The Gospel of Luke mentions Lysanias as Tetrarch of Abilene when John the Baptist began his ministry. For centuries, Skeptics used this reference to attack biblical accuracy, claiming Lysanias was a historical error. Then archaeologists started finding coins, and suddenly Luke's precision became undeniable. These bronze coins were minted in Ituraya, a mountainous region covering parts of modern-day Lebanon and southern Syria. The Itureans were originally Arab nomads who settled in the area and gradually adopted Hellenistic culture, creating a unique blend of Eastern and Western traditions that shows up clearly in their coinage. The imagery on these coins tells the story of a culture caught between worlds. You'll find Greek gods alongside local deities, Roman symbols mixed with indigenous designs, inscriptions in Greek referencing rulers with Semitic names. It's cultural fusion preserved in bronze, showing us how complex the ancient Middle East really was. Zenodorus, another ruler mentioned in historical sources, issued coins that are even rarer than those of Lysanias. His bronzes often feature temples and religious imagery, suggesting that the Etrurian tetrarchs maintained their own cultic practices even while operating within the broader Roman system. What makes these coins particularly fascinating is their connection to Herod's territorial ambitions. The Etrurian Tetrarchy controlled strategic trade routes between Damascus and the Mediterranean coast, making it economically valuable despite its small size. Herod the Great eventually absorbed much of their territory, but not before these bronze witnesses to their independence were scattered across the region. The archaeological record shows that Etrurian bronzes circulated widely beyond their borders, found in excavations from Galilee to the Golan Heights. This suggests active trade relationships with neighboring Jewish and Syrian communities, economic integration that probably made the eventual political absorption easier. For biblical scholars, these coins provide crucial evidence for the complex political situation that forms the background to the New Testament. Luke's casual reference to Lysanias wasn't historical confusion, it was precise knowledge of local political arrangements that modern readers had simply forgotten. The survival of these coins is somewhat miraculous. Unlike precious metal currency that gets melted down and reused, bronze coins were often just abandoned when they became obsolete. They ended up in trash pits, construction fill, forgotten corners of ancient buildings, waiting for archaeologists to rediscover them centuries later. Today, Etrurian bronzes remain among the most overlooked coins in biblical numismatics. They don't have the fame of Pilate Prutot or the religious significance of temple shekels, but they provide irreplaceable evidence for the detailed accuracy of biblical historical references. These forgotten coins from a forgotten kingdom prove that the gospel writers knew their contemporary world with remarkable precision. And taking the top spot, the most mysterious and controversial coin on our entire list, the god on the winged wheel drachm from Gaza, a silver coin that has sparked decades of scholarly debate and might completely change how we understand ancient Jewish religious imagery. This isn't just rare, it's archaeologically explosive. The coin shows a bearded deity seated on a winged wheel, an image that some scholars believe represents an early artistic depiction of Yahweh, the God of Israel. If they're right, this could be one of the oldest visual representations of the Jewish God ever discovered. The controversy starts with the iconography. Traditional Jewish law strictly forbids making images of God, yet here's a coin from Gaza, a Philistine city with strong Canaanite traditions, showing what appears to be a divine figure in a distinctly Israelite context. The winged wheel motif appears in Ezekiel's famous vision of God's chariot, making the connection even more intriguing. Gaza's position as a border city between Jewish and Gentile territories makes this coin particularly significant. It was a place where cultures mixed, where religious boundaries blurred, where artistic traditions cross-pollinated in ways that wouldn't have been possible in Jerusalem's more strictly regulated environment. Some scholars argue that the seated figure represents a local Canaanite deity, perhaps Marnus, the patron god of Gaza. Others insist the iconography is too specifically aligned with biblical imagery to be coincidental. The debate has been raging for decades, with new archaeological discoveries occasionally adding fuel to both sides. The craftsmanship is exceptional. This wasn't some crude local imitation. It was professionally minted silver, probably intended for international trade. The detail in the figure's beard, the precision of the winged wheel design, the careful placement of subsidiary symbols, all suggest this was an important official issue. Recent metallurgical analysis has confirmed the coin's ancient origins, putting to rest earlier suggestions that it might be a modern forgery, but authentication has only intensified the theological debate. If this coin is authentic, what does it tell us about religious diversity in ancient Palestine? The implications extend far beyond numismatics. This single coin challenges our assumptions about ancient Jewish art, about religious boundaries in the Persian period, about the development of monotheistic imagery, about the relationship between Jewish and Canaanite religious traditions. Whether you see this coin as depicting Yahweh or a pagan deity, one thing is certain. It represents a moment in history when religious expression was more experimental, more open to artistic interpretation, more willing to push boundaries that would later become absolute. This mysterious silver dram from Gaza doesn't just top our list because of its rarity. It earns the #1 spot because it forces us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about ancient religious art and the development of Jewish visual culture. The scholars and archaeologists who study these coins aren't just academic specialists. They're detectives uncovering clues to humanity's most important stories. And the work isn't finished. Right now, somewhere in the Middle East, another coin is waiting in the soil, ready to surprise us, ready to challenge our assumptions, ready to reveal another piece of the puzzle. These 8 biblical coins you've never heard of represent just the beginning. There are undoubtedly more forgotten currencies, more overlooked artifacts, more hidden treasures waiting to reshape our understanding of biblical history. The past isn't as settled as we sometimes think. It's alive, dynamic, constantly revealing new secrets to those patient enough to sift through the evidence one coin at a time.